Well, thank God it's Friday, and thank God it's Pat McArt from all the way from Noonanal. When I was a kid, Pat, they used to talk about Tyrconnell as the Irish for
Uh,
Donegal, and now it's Doonanal. Do you know what?
well, Terry Connell's the old ancient name. Dún na Gall means Fort of the Foreigners.
Right.
Uh, so, um, so I'm not quite sure. But yeah, well, there's a local paper called the Tyrconnell Tribune.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Yeah.
yeah, so I think Tyrconnell was the old ancient name, but I think that there's a translation of Dún na Gall means Fort of the Foreigners. So it's either or.
It seems to be, well, in my Irish classes, it seems to be they all talk about Noonanal, Donegal, as if
Sure,
Tyrconnell.
that's all right up there with Tyrone, Owen's land, and
Oh,
Tyrconnell.
yeah. Well,
So
it's sort of wonderful that, isn't it? You know, that
yeah.
those you're able to understand things better. And listen to Garawa, Lisburn is the fort of the gamblers.
Hey, Judy, you're talking about Irish names. Stranmillis to me was always the ultimate British name, and then
Yeah.
I realised Stranmillis means sweet stream.
Oh,
Stranmillis.
oh yes, oh yes.
So there you go.
Really, I think that's why Linda Irvine's very wise. She does her Irish classes, and she gets people interested in the place names where they live, so they
Yeah,
discover what those mean. And they're all around the place, right down to
absolutely.
townlands and areas and really small patches. So it's a sense of
Yeah,
belonging. Okay,
yeah.
enough of such ponderings. Let's get down to brass tacks here. This is what it says in the papers, as you know, and or the media. So what we're going to talk about is the very interesting program, Unquiet Graves. That was on, I think it was Wednesday night, wasn't it?
Yep.
On RTE. And Unquiet Graves, as most of our viewers will probably know, deals with the Glenanne gang, the gang which, according to Anne Cadwallader, in her book Lethal Allies, were responsible for the deaths of over 120 people. And there have been apparently signs of, more than signs, clear indications of collusion. So, Pat, you saw it as well. What did you think?
Yeah. Judy, I think it's slightly more than signs of collusion. There's absolute evidence of collusion. What is it someone said in the course of the program? The RUC had a singularly unique record, not one conviction for 120 murders in that area.
Yeah.
The woman, I saw your own blog about the woman who was, her husband came, the two guys came, Robert Jackson or Jackal, the Jackal, anyway, came to the door, knocked the door, woman comes out, want to speak to your husband. Anyway, they shot him at the door. Like, the attitude of the RUC to that woman was unbelievably barbaric. They brought her up to sort of a station and says, put your hand in the man. She says, on the way up, nobody spoke to her. Like, this woman's traumatized and all the rest. So there was clear hatred for the whole nationalist community. My enemy's enemy is my friend, or your enemy, that sort of, the Arab one. So the whole thing. But it was not just a wee bit of collusion, it was massive collusion. And everybody knew it. Jude, one thing, and I said yesterday in another place, that the one thing that got me, and it still gets me, is, and I actually do get angry about it, this whole thing was set up to make out one thing, that the IRA's violence was sort of coming out of nowhere, that there was no motivation for it, that it was totally unnecessary and all the rest of it. Now, when you put the whole thing in context, 50 years of unionist misrule and sectarianism and bigotry. The first Catholic sectarian murder was carried out by the Gusty Spence. I think the guy's name was Michael Ward. He was an 18-year-old barman. Yeah. The first policeman was shot by a loyalist. When the civil rights came onto the street, they were met by state violence and loyalist threats. And the whole thing had a background. You know, there's no context. And then for the best part of 10 years, the RUC colluded and the UDR colluded in the murder of Catholics. And yet the only players that were on the stage that were sort of all the time getting bashed by the Southern media and was the IRA. Like, there was two stories to tell here, at least.
That's still the case. I think, actually, not just during the Troubles. I think the media in the South are still doing the bashing of Mary Lou and company, even though they weren't around during the Troubles at all.
Yeah.
There was two things that interested me, Pat. I thought it was, it just reminded, because I'd read Lethal Allies, and I'm sure you have as well. So, in a way, the Irish Times did a review of it. And in a way, what they said was true. the guy started off, Ed Powers, his name. He said there are no surprises, just a reminder of how evil took root and spread, which I guess is true, all right. But I actually found his review of it very, very disappointing, because so many people who might have seen it or not seen it go to the newspaper review to help them to clarify their thinking in the whole matter.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Ed Power has shaped this in a way that I really didn't find it particularly enlightening or helpful.
Can I interrupt you a wee second, Jude, because you're cutting up, and I have a terrible memory of forgetting these things after. But yesterday morning, here's a program that struck a chord big time. It was trending on social media. RTE yesterday morning, not a mention of it. This morning, not a mention of it. Here's a program that is actually a major issue about what went on in our country, and it's died to death. Now, had it been in any other subject, I presume there'd been yesterday morning. Why didn't they have RT's main program nowadays in the morning is Claire Byrne Live? Why didn't they have John Bruton on and asking John? Much did the Irish state know about what was going on? Well, even Bertie Ahern, some of the ministers were still alive at that period. Not at all. Well, surely in the middle of all this COVID, it would have been a nice distraction if nothing else.
It was very striking. I quite agree, totally. For example, if there's anything on prime time at all, they usually trail it, to tell the viewers it's going to be coming up, and they build it up. I didn't know. I really literally didn't know what channel this was going to be on. I knew it was on a Wednesday night, but I thought it might have been maybe ITV or something, or it might have been Sky, it might have been BBC. I didn't know where it was. Yeah. And I got my wife to go, and she said, "Oh yeah, it's on RT." So that shows you the extent to which they prepared their listeners to view this. You did get the feeling that they maybe put the bloody thing on as a sort of a duty that they were forced into. Certainly when I read this guy Ed Power's review of it, it comes across as the homework of a reluctant schoolboy. He's going through it and telling us the facts, but they're sort of, I just don't feel he got the horror of the thing at all. He says, for example, he says, he reminds the viewers that this was made by Sean Murray and written by Sean Murray, the film that is, quite great. But he reminds the readers that Murray, a nephew of Danny McCann, one of the 3 IRA members killed by the SAS in Gibraltar
I read that.
in 1988, spruces up the narrative with dramatic flourishes.
Yeah.
Well, two things. What has that got to do with the bloody programme?
Absolutely. Do they mention who other people are? Not at all. That's just a useful little sort of, oh, by the way, this is where this guy's coming from.
Yeah. And he also says something to the effect that, I'm trying to find where it said exactly. Yes, he says, this all happened during the darkest years of the Troubles as the bodies of innocents piled up on both sides. So we're back to this old refrain of one lot's as bad as the other.
Yeah.
Now, I was, as I say, I just got the feeling this is a guy going through his work. He also got something factually wrong. He said Margaret Campbell, who recalls being forced to point out and to touch her husband's killer at an RUC lineup, and no arrests were made. Well, he doesn't begin to catch the horror of that scene and how moving it was when that woman talked as an old woman, looking back in those days. And secondly, she never touched. She made the point.
No, she couldn't do it.
Bring herself to touch this guy. She thought she was going to faint again. So it seems to me that the job that the Irish Times did on reporting it was a bit disappointing. And I thought the job that the RTE did on reminding its viewers that it was coming up, or warning its viewers or telling its viewers in advance that the program was coming up, I thought they both fell down in that.
There's a prescribed narrative, and now, and it's like a train on a track. It's been 40 years of this is the way it's been reported, and I think maybe people like me and you are pushing water up a hill and trying, because it's now so ingrained in the Republic's storytelling in regard to the North that there's only one. The Nationalist people are I don't know how you even. I don't know. I guess the Ruth Dudley Edwards, the Owen Harrises, the who the hell else, John Bruton, their stories, their narrative has taken precedence totally. And what do you call it? That the sort of the nationalists and the Republicans were the mad guys and the bad guys, and the others were only reactionary.
Well, here, I'm going to bathe both of us in glory here. I have had people on Facebook come on and say, it's a good job you're doing, yourself and Pat, that you're at least speaking a truth that other people aren't speaking. My fear is that we might, in our eagerness to speak a truth, perhaps be exaggerating it. So when I'm very critical of RTE for not flagging it up in advance, when I'm very critical of this guy, Ed Power, for his review in the Irish Times, I'm wondering to what extent that comes from my own position on it. Am I maybe seeing fault where there isn't fault?
Jude, with the greatest respect, that's a load of rubbish. I've just, myself, and I've said yesterday morning, I thought, right, here's a program last night. It absolutely was riveting TV. It was a great story. And there was a major issue there. Did the Irish government know this was going on? How many people knew? Did they do anything about it? Did they make any representations to the British government? The families of these people are still alive. Was there any communication with those people? Is there any pressure going on now to follow up on this? What about the historical team? Yesterday morning, RT blank. Now, God, tell me, had it been any other subject, would it have been treated like a? It's not paranoia. It's a real, genuine question. And I make no apologies for saying there is something going on here that, there's an agenda and a narrative that, you have to stay within those parameters. If you're an RT, they don't want you going outside that. Keep the IRA as bad guys and no sympathy, just leave it at that. Like you keep referring to that review from that guy. He's almost saying nothing to see here. Move on.
I think that's pretty much the message, in my view. But again, I may be a little bit biased. Just one final word on that program. I was struck by, to be honest now, it was, as you said, it was riveting. But I thought the last 5 to 10 minutes really let it down in a way. Because,
you mean that?
Well, it gave us a poem of Seamus Heaney's. And there was these sort of... not cartoon,
graphics,
but sort of visuals.
Yeah.
And he was talking about a cousin of his that was killed by the army, I think. I thought it went on over long. I really did. And then after that, it had music played by some group or another, Irish music, and it gave you the listings of all the people who were involved in this project. And now I can understand that they want to do these things, but I thought it was dragged out too long. I thought they could have done that far quicker and sharper. The story had been told. I thought in a way that the Seamus Heaney poem and the list of credits so slowly going up one after the other, I thought that made for an anticlimax to some extent. That was my feeling. What do you think?
No, but I didn't find that at all. In fact, I sat and watched it, and in fact, I was nearly taking the opposite view of you. I thought actually it was very moving, that poem.
Did you?
I really genuinely did. And I sat and watched it. No, okay, you're more into you've done a lot more broadcasting than I have. But basically, I found it actually quite moving.
Yeah, well, it is a moving poem, but I thought it was a distraction. Because...
Can't agree. I really genuinely can't agree with that. I really genuinely don't.
Yeah, I think he's talking about his cousin, and I'm not sure. Yeah. It's not even made clear.
But there's a universality to that, Jude. It was his cousin, but it's any family. It's the same. Yeah.
Yeah. You could be right. All right. Different folks, different strokes.
Strokes.
Okay. Right. Let's move on now to the second item I think we want to talk about today, and that is the question. Is it the question of pubs?
Good. Yeah, we're chatting. It's not a riveting subject, but if I owned a pub anywhere in Ireland these days, I would be shaking in my boots. The day of Jude, when I was a young fella, there used to be a golden rule that the guy that owned the pub in any village was the richest man in the village. He was usually the undertaker as well for some reason. I never quite got that.
But no connection between the two of them.
What the booze did for you. But I mean, you go to any wee town in our village in Donegal or Cavan or Monaghan or anywhere else. But way back in the 50s and 60s, and the publican, he was the only man who had the car, and he had all the rest. Nowadays, there's a road between Derry and Moville, and when I was a young editor, and he used to drive down, take my family, they were all small, and we used to drive down to Moville and Greencalf, go to the beach there. And along the way, I remember there would be about 5 big pubs, and they were all thriving with dairy ones out for the day and all the
I
rest.
have drunken some of them myself.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, exactly. So anyway, you drive down now, and they're all closed. As far there might be one still open. There might be. I'm not 100% certain. But if you drive down during the day, there, years ago there used to be cars outside, and at night, good God, bum. Now, and it's true. All the pubs that I remember from my childhood, even when I was 17 or 18 year and just starting drinking, the number of pubs they're all shut now. And people drink at home, and they drink a lot more at home than they ever did at the pub, I would think.
Yeah, and that was the case before COVID. Pubs are in the news now because the government are giving them again and again false signals that they can open.
Yeah.
And the pub people are really going nuts. They're saying, we're going out of business. And they were saying this before the COVID thing, and now they're really up against the wall. Schools are back and so on. And they're saying, we can't go on anymore if this goes on. So I'm wondering, will we come out of, when and if we come out of COVID, will there actually be very few pubs in Ireland?
Jude, I think in Dublin, this is the 4th time they've been false start. That they've been told for. This is the 4th time. They were told they're opening, I think, next Monday. They're now not open in Dublin. Now they're opening, I think, the rest of the country. They're opening. But after so much, and they've spent so much. Jude, if you're going to a pub these days, say you're going about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You'd be lucky if you see 2 people in a pub. Jude, and the other thing as well. I'm not an expert in the prices, but I think it's something like a pint of beer now costs €4.20 or something like that.
Yeah.
You go down to the off license and you can buy, I don't know how many cans of beer. I saw I heard someone at 19 bottles or 20 bottles for $11.99 or something. Or you can buy it on the supermarket off license. You can buy a bottle of wine at $6.99. So why would you, for 1 pint? Why would you pay 4? So the whole thing of raison d'etre, or whatever the expression you want to use for a pub, is starting to disappear.
Well, maybe it's the same reason as people go to the movies, or did go to the movies, rather than simply sit at home and watch the movie on Netflix or on Sky or
the social occasion.
Yes, that sense of like the Italians and the Continentals are great with the piazzas, where people sit and coffee, and it's the surroundings that matter as much. And certainly I find that as a kid, well, not as a kid, like a teenager and a young man, I was very aware of the atmosphere of a pub. We never thought, myself and my friends never thought of drinking it in our flats or our bedsitters or whatever. It was into the pub, and there was an excitement to that and a social dimension. And maybe we just have to accept the fact that that's something social that's gone. Maybe something will replace it. For example, these men's, when I was young, it was all men who did the drinking. Now, men could bring their girlfriend or their wives with them, but I never remember, when I was young, a woman in drinking on her own. That essentially was a flag. I'm a prostitute. That was almost the conclusion people drew.
Yeah.
So that's how, but they were largely men. And I think to some extent that's true still. But we have this movement, men's sheds, that you're maybe familiar with, Pat. Where people in especially in rural districts have this sort of centre they go to, and it's a very strong social thing, and I gather it's spread all through, certainly all through Britain, and I think maybe America as well. Maybe it's something like that will replace the local...
but Jude, what we start off with, and it's simple, I'd say we are actually watching the demise of the traditional Irish pub that has been here for about 200 years.
I mean, you need something to replace it.
Yeah. Well, hey, Jude, we were having this discussion before. We're becoming a very Americanized. It used to be that we had a collegial thing or a collective thing. Now we come home in the evening, get out of our cars, shut the door, left our wee briefcases, go in the door, shut our door, put on our computer. We sort of bubbles we all live in, and you go into any housing estate, north or south, and that's the increasing way of, and you don't even know the names of your neighbours nowadays.
Well, would that not be to at least some extent the consequence of COVID?
No, that was happening long before COVID. Jude, I lived in Colmore in Derry many years ago, and I remember you'd come in the evening, and the most would say, "Hi, how's it going, Philip?" or whatever the guy on the other side, I can't remember his name. And that was it. And it seems to be that that's the way it's going. And the whole idea of the old traditional pub meeting place, and you knew everybody and they knew you, that day is long gone.
Yeah, I would agree it's gone, but I still think that the Irish people, being the gregarious race that they are, will find some sort of social stage in which they'll be able to come together, whether it's men's sheds or whatever else. I mean, we took to the pub like duck to water.
Or duck to whiskey.
And it wasn't simply the drink, it was the drink and other things as well.
Yeah.
We're overshooting our time, so we'll just take 2 minutes for this last point, which was in the papers. The fact that 10% of Americans, they have found in the poll, believe that the Holocaust was inflicted by the Jews.
Yeah.
So they didn't see the Jews as the victims of the Holocaust, they saw them as the perpetrators of it.
Yeah.
What do you think that says about Americans?
Jeez, Jude, where do you start here? Apparently 15% of them thought it was a myth as well, but anyway, the whole thing. But look, when you've got people, I think, right, two things.
You're frozen.
Only 10% of Americans. I remember reading this and I was struck by it. I'm a frozen. Have I come out yet?
No, you're right again now, yeah.
But only 10% of Americans have passports, and they're so insular. And look, when you can elect dumb Donald as your president, I think that's, any other country, how anybody can buy the crap that he comes out with. And it shows how there's something wrong with their education system, that a man who's a liar, a cheat, a fraud, and he's, if 10% people believe that the Jews actually were responsible for the Holocaust, you got a serious problem in your education system, haven't you?
Well, there's
if it was 1%, it'd be bad, but 10%.
Well, I just make this point. Let's not kick Donald Trump. I mean, I don't think he was the one that said.
No, but the point I was making was
something else.
Yeah.
So let's stick with it as Americans. Well, two things about the fact that only a certain number of them have passports. America is the United States is such a vast stretch of territory, and it's so varied that really it's not fair perhaps to talk about them in insular, because there is such huge variety at home. Now, I think actually it still has consequences, but you need to keep that in mind as well. And here's the other thing now, and I'm really interested in this. We'll have to I'll allow you 10 seconds after I've been stopping. Not because I think you'll have anything worth listening to.
Anyway, yeah.
And this is, I remember reading back in the 70s about a report about a girl in a secondary modern school. And the writer was citing this as an example of how useless the secondary modern schools were in England. And she was asked who was the Prime Minister, and she didn't know. And that was seen as a pure ignorance and a hopeless education system. I disagree. I disagree completely. We know the things that have relevance and importance in our lives. So what difference did it make to her whether Harold Wilson or Harold Macmillan was the Prime Minister? Not a jot. The same thing I would say would apply to that 10% who didn't know. There are people who live their lives, they're busy doing other things, they have other stuff on their mind, for better or worse. And why would they want to carry around that in their head? It won't make a blind bit of difference. In any case, take the 90% who know that the Jews were the victims of a Holocaust. What difference will it make? You could say, oh, well, they're enlightened. Did it change anything? Did it change the American foreign policy? Did it do anything? Nothing. So much of the stuff that we are taught and know, first of all, we do it because it seems to have relevance to us. But the stuff that hasn't got relevance to us, I don't know why we're carrying it around our heads.
There speaks a university lecture. I'm not even going to bother attempting to answer that. You won that one. I'll leave you that one.
We're square now, because I said the same.
We're square, right?
Okay, bye.
Okay, Jude. Cheers. Good luck. Bye.